Fairy tales are part of our DNA, says director Lindy Hume.
We are hardwired to recognise those archetypes in the stories. We know those stories from children and we keep them in our lives forever.
Hume directs Cinderella for San Diego Opera. Lauren McNeese sings the title role. She says it's the ongoing human struggle that makes fairy tales so enduring.
And there's catharsis involved in that struggle, and watching the hero or heroine make their way through the storyline. It's the reason why we all love Lord of the Rings. We walk through it with those characters, and then I feel we can then address it to our own lives.
People have been enjoying the Cinderella story for thousands of years. It can trace its origins back to the 1st century and a story about a Greek slave girl becoming an Egyptian queen. But what remains consistent is an archetypal simplicity, says Professor Joseph Thomas.
Fairy tales and folk tales are marked by very simple characters and usually very simple plots, which makes them endlessly adaptable.
They have a simple narrative so that they can plummet into some really deep, almost depth charges of the psyche, because they actually mean something. Their function in our lives is a little bit of a lesson, a little bit of a roadmap through certain circumstances.
That's why Hume roots her opera in the real world, with portraits of real kings in the Prince's Library. Her Cinderella also draws in part on Perrault's charming French variation of the fairy tale, as well as the darker Brothers Grimm take. And in case you forgot just how dark those Grimm boys could get, here's a reminder.
When the prince is coming around to get the sisters to try on the shoe, the sisters can't fit their feet in. So the first sister lops off her toes so that she can fit her foot into the sandal, or the shoe. The prince is fooled, and he goes off with his new bride until magic doves show up and say, "Look at her foot, it's a bloody mess."
The opera doesn't go that dark, but it's serious about the abuse Cinderella experiences.
For instance, in the Act 1 quintet, when you see the real abuse and you see her hitting rock bottom, then the aria at the end is just that much more exciting and rewarding for everybody.
I tend to like my fairy tales fairly dark, but at the same time I also love sitcom, so I like to blend those two elements but still come up with something truly touching and truthful for the ending, which is very heartwarming.
Rossini's opera, unlike the Disney cartoon, arrives at that transformative ending without resorting to any supernatural elements, says San Diego Opera's Nicholas Revelis.
Rossini and his librettist Ferretti assiduously avoided anything magical. There's no fairy godmother. Instead of a fairy godmother, we have a kind of philosopher, teacher, older, wiser gentleman of the court who is on the lookout for the perfect bride for the prince.
The tales are modified versions of an architecture that allows different tellers to use the stories for different purposes.
Each interpretation of a fairy tale is uniquely suited to the time period from which it emerges. For Hume, that meant showing the darkness before you get to the light.
It's a very special opportunity to create a production and present a production of this wonderful, nearly 200-year-old piece that is all about goodness in the world and the power of love and the power of goodness. You know, these are dark times, these are difficult times in the world, and I think when we as artists have an opportunity to simply present something beautiful to the world and make people feel great as they leave the theatre, that's what we aim to do, and I think we can do that with this production. So I just want everybody to enjoy it.
But please, she adds, don't come with a template of what you think Cinderella is. Instead, come with an open mind and enjoy the story as Rossini tells it and as Hume has chosen to interpret it for a 21st century audience. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.